Hi, welcome to my kitchen. I have a special ingredient today that I've used before, but I'm going to use it today to make something really yummy. It's, here it is, Zaatar. Zaatar, wild thyme is what it is. It's been dried, added sesame seeds, sumac, and salt. And this is the quintessential dried dip of the Arab world. We dip it in olive oil, and then we dip in this, and then we eat. Now, there's all kinds of versions of thyme. This happens to be the one that's native to the Arab world. Now, you probably know this thyme. This is what is known as French thyme. It's got teeny weeny little leaves, and I like to think of it as the cousin of this thyme, and there's many others as well. So I'm going to use this ingredient, beautiful olive oil, to make a beautiful bread. This bread that I'm making is similar to the Italian focaccia, or in Sicily it's also known as sfinzione. And basically what that means is the bread is quite thick and it's spongy. It's a looser dough, you'll see when we start to make it. And I'm adding onto it the Arabic ingredients that I adore. So let's get started with making the dough first. I'm actually going to be using my mixer today because there's a lot of kneading, and this is going to give me a lot of help today. So I'm going to start by putting in half a cup of lukewarm water, which means that's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, like about body temperature. So that's going to go inside my bowl. And then I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Now, I actually just leave this to ferment a little bit, but this is one way of knowing. If it starts to bubble, then you know that the yeast is alive. So I leave it for 5 minutes and then I come back. Okay, now I have my flour already measured out, and I'm using all-purpose flour. You could certainly use pizza flour or flour that is for dough, okay, that has a little higher gluten. Start with more water to my already half a cup here. Here I have 2.5 cups of lukewarm water again. You don't want water that is going to be too hot, because hot water is going to kill the yeast. Now, you'll notice I didn't put any sugar. I'm sure everybody's going to ask me, why didn't you put sugar? Because the yeast needs something to eat. Well, it really doesn't, because the sugar that it's going to feast on and allow it to bubble is actually going to come from the flour, the natural sugars that are coming from starch. All this, I'm actually putting it in all at once, okay? I have the paddle attachment and not the whisk, because I'm not trying to incorporate air. I just want to blend and mix the flour. And then start the dough, and you'll see that as it's mixing, the flour is absorbing water, okay? As it goes and continues. Okay. So I'm gonna continue mixing this for about 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes later, I'm just gonna turn it off and just show you what the dough looks like. Now you can still see that the dough is sticking around the side, and it hasn't really kneaded enough to create the gluten. So that's what we're trying to do here. So by all this kneading and you know, continuous motion, we're trying to wake up the gluten and make it nice and fluffy and stretchy and elastic. I'm going to let it knead for 10 minutes to 15 minutes. That's why I'm using this to help me. Otherwise, this is going to be quite the workout. So I'm going to knead it, and then you'll see how the dough starts to release from the sides of the bowl, and that's a sign you know that it's ready to leave alone and let rise. All right, here we are 10 minutes later of kneading, and we are ready. I'm going to lower, and I want you to see how the dough has changed, okay? It's very elastic. The glutens have definitely woken up. This is what it looks like. It's really, really elastic, okay? And it doesn't really, I mean, it's tacky and sticky, but that's the way it's supposed to be. In my bowl is I'm going to add in some beautiful, actually Palestinian olive oil, which is my favorite. So I'm gonna add in a generous amount of olive oil. I'd say about 1/4 cup. And I'm just going to put it in the bowl. Now I'm just going to leave it swimming in this beautiful olive oil, and you see how smooth it is and how loose the dough is. And I leave it to rise for 1.5 to 2 hours. All right, so it's actually not only doubled in size, it's tripled. All right, so I'm just going to pick it up gently because I don't want to deflate it too much. I want to keep the bubbles, all right? And I just want to lift it, and I just want to show you the bubbles, you see? And that's what you're after, exactly. So what I do is I just give it a couple of folds and turn it around. Now I'm going to cut it in half because I'm going to be using 2 pans. These are quarter sheets. I have some more olive oil. Just you thought there's enough olive oil. The more olive oil, the better. And then basically I'm trying to stretch my dough. You see how it's elasticy? Now it's going to take a couple of times before it actually fills the sheet. So at this point, I'm not even going to try to fight with it because it's going to win the battle. So I'm going to leave it alone and I'm going to cover it. It doesn't have to be fully covered. And I'm going to set it aside for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, and you will see a little difference here. I'm going to move this again. I'm going to reuse that. And you see how the dough now is a little more helpful. Okay, it's actually allowing me to move it to the sides. Okay, so that little 10-minute rest makes all the difference. Okay, do you see all those bubbles? This is the beauty of this dough because you're going to get a really nice spongy texture. All right, after the final rest, the dough has risen again and pretty much filled the entire pan. Now, as you know, I've made 2. And there's a reason for that. There's a proverb in Arabic that says, "El jar qabl ad-dar," which means your neighbor is before your house. So it's more important to have a neighbor. And we have some lovely neighbors here. Actually, it's a newlywed couple. He's Italian and she's from Lebanon. And I want to make one for me and one for them. So this is going to be a surprise for them. And I think he'll appreciate the fact that I'm making a dough that is Italian in its origin, but it has the flavors of the Arab world, i.e. Zaatar. So I'm going to take 2 boxes today and hopefully they'll both be happy. I'm going to bring a little bit more of that beautiful extra virgin olive oil. Remember, get the best olive oil that you can afford for this because it matters. The taste matters. Now, what I start first with is dimpling the dough. Okay, basically just with my fingers, and this is not a good time to go get a manicure. You don't want pointy nails here. You want them to be relatively dull. So I'm dimpling it just to break some of the bubbles. And I mean, this is the traditional look of what a focaccia looks like. As you can see, there isn't very much resistance. I'm going to bring my magic ingredient or the star ingredient, and this is the za'atar that I told you about at the very beginning. Now, I'll tell you a story. When my parents first came to Canada a long time ago, we had a neighbor that was very lovely. And my mother, of course, she took to heart that proverb that I just mentioned. Whenever she baked, whenever she cooked, she always liked to share with friends and with family and with the neighbors particularly. But this one particular neighbor didn't like za'atar, which I thought was really odd. There isn't anybody I've ever met in my life who doesn't like the smell of beautiful za'atar baking with bread. She didn't like it. So for some reason, whenever my mother made manaish za'atar, anything that had za'atar in it, she would know and she'd knock on the door and say, "Are you baking that again?" So she wasn't a fan of za'atar. I like to think that if she was around and I saw her now that I would offer her this and she might change her mind because I don't know, za'atar is pretty special. So I have put the dry za'atar on top and I've also sprinkled some of the French thyme as well. And this is very easy to do. You just pull back those leaves backwards and they will fall in. So it just gives it a nice little peppery flavor. And then I like to add in a little bit of chili flakes just to give it a little bit of a kick. Now you can, of course, forget about that. You don't have to put it in. I like to put it in just for a little kick, no more than that. So my oven is preheating now at 425, and I'm going to put this on the lower racks because I really want the dough from the bottom to get nice and golden and crisp. So off to the oven it goes, and I'll continue to make the second one. Okay, here we are, the final result. Look at that. The smell in my kitchen is to die for. Again, like I said, the smell of za'atar and olive oil and fresh dough baked is intoxicating. And you can hear the dough. Okay, you know this is going to be a treat, a crispy treat. Can't have anything with za'atar. In the Arab world, particularly Palestinians love their tea and they love it with meramiye. And meramiye is actually sage that's dried. That's one of our favorite flavors. So my tea is ready, one for me and one for you. And I have a nice serrated knife. It's cooled down a little bit, so I'm going to cut into it and I want you to listen. Hear that? So nice. This is like cutting into the best gift ever. Okay, I want to show you, look at that. And that is what we're after. All of that proofing and patience pays off. So you've got a nice spongy texture, the bubbles are there, and you could eat this on its own, as I'm going to do now with my tea, or for breakfast with cheese. You could even take this piece of bread that is very thick and slice it here in half and create a sandwich of some sort. I'm going to break off a piece. It's still a little warm, but that's the best way to eat it. I can't think of anything more delicious than a bite of za'atar and meramiye tea. And this is the perfect marriage of a beautiful Italian bread that's crossed over to the other side and married with a very Arab Palestinian ingredient. So I hope you give it a try. I'm going to take my other pan now and share it with my neighbors. So until next time, bye. Now, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. There's many more videos and recipes to come.